There's a literal war being fought every single day for your attention. And the truth is, most of us are losing this war. We're just outgunned by the army of behavioral psychologists, the computer programmers, all the marketers working around the clock to devise sneaky ways of just sucking us into one more scroll or just one more video or just, one more distraction. Not only are we outgunned, but most of us made it out of basic training, aka high school, without anybody ever actually showing us how to wield our most powerful weapon. Our focus. I'm going to share the 10 commandments of hyperfocus, which I've used over the past decade to unlock the flow state on command to get more done in less time with zero headache.
Damn, a terrible story, honestly.
Number 1, never forget your most valuable asset. This is one of the most common misconceptions in the world. If you ask 100 people on the street, what's your most valuable asset? The majority of them will likely say time. But that is completely wrong. First, one of the fundamental aspects of an asset is that it's something you own or can control. Time is neither of those things. It's just a construct of human consciousness. If I come to you and I ask for a minute of your time, you don't actually give me a unit of time that you've stockpiled in the corner or saved up in a bank account. Second, and this might come as a surprise, but your time actually has zero value to anyone, which flies in the face of the idea that time is money. If this were true, you could simply show up to work, you could pass out, and they would still give you money. But you don't, because it's not your time you're getting paid for. You're getting paid for your presence. And how present you are is a function of how focused you are. So our first commandment of hyperfocus is to just never forget that focus is your most valuable asset. All right, our second commandment is to always know where your focus is best spent. The first step in mastering your focus is to understand where it's being stolen from you. See, most of us are just terrible at tracking what we do and how long we do it throughout the day. And in my experience, we tend to overestimate how much time we actually spend on useful tasks by around 50%. So for example, if you tell me that you spent 3 hours a day working on your book, then I can be reasonably certain that you actually only spent around 1.5 hours writing. And the other 1.5 hours are probably bathroom breaks or checking your phone, email, social media, and just generally doing a whole lot of things that are not writing. So here's a good rule of thumb for improving at anything in life. That which gets measured gets managed. And to manage our focus, we have to first measure it. And we do this by creating a focus audit. So to conduct a focus audit, let's just make it really simple. You open up a spreadsheet, and then at the top of every hour, you just take a second to write down what exactly you worked on in the previous 60 minutes. And for the more tech-savvy people out there, you could use a time tracking app like Toggle or Harvest. If you do this for an entire week, you're gonna have a pretty good sense for how much time you're actually wasting in a day, which is good because it means we now understand where we're leaking attention and we can start plugging those holes. All right, hyperfocus commandment number 3, energy fuels focus. It's simple. No energy equals no focus. And this is not a revolutionary concept. I mean, we all intuitively understand this, right? And yet, raise your hand if you're guilty of trashing your body with zero exercise, poor sleep, and even worse nutrition. Okay, for those sitting in the back who can't see, both of my hands went up because I'm guilty of this. The truth is, whenever life gets busy, the first thing that often just goes out the window is our self-care. We compromise our sleep schedule. We eat for convenience, not nutrition. We exercise less because, let's face it, you're busy and you don't have the time to carve out an extra hour to get into the gym every day. So it shouldn't come as a surprise then that the quality of your work is going to decline. So we've got to ask ourselves the question, is the goal to be busy or to be effective? And when viewed through this lens, we see that true success is never determined by how much you get done, but by what you get done. If you focus on the right things, then everything starts to fall into place. And to me, the 3 most right things that you should never compromise are your 3 levers of energy: your sleep, your exercise, and your nutrition. You get them dialed and keep them dialed. I promise future you will thank you. All right, hyperfocus commandment number 4. Close those cognitive loops. Listen, you can only juggle so many thoughts at a time. Personally, I have a really terrible short-term memory. In fact, here's a really funny side story. I was re-diagnosed with ADHD when I was 27 years old. To do this, they administered an IQ test called the Woodcock-Johnson. Now, it takes a couple hours to take this test, and it's brutal. So by the end of it, you have a pretty good gauge of like all your cognitive strengths and weaknesses. And my results, as you would expect with somebody who has ADHD, were wildly variable. I had a number of areas where I tested very, very high, but I had two areas in particular where I tested incredibly low. Not surprisingly, one of those categories I tested poorly for is short-term memory. Turns out I maybe have the memory of a goldfish. Things pretty much go in one ear and right out the other for me. So to combat this, I've had to create systems to get thoughts and ideas out of my head as quickly and effectively as possible. The longer a thought swirls around my brain, the more likely it is I'm just gonna lose it. And this makes sense if you think about your brain like a computer running multiple applications simultaneously. Your system likely isn't going to strain to run 2, maybe 3 programs at the same time, but if you open up 30 programs at a time, then the whole system starts to get bogged down. The solution that's worked for me is to keep a second brain. Simply put, this is just a software, maybe even a journal that I use to brain dump all the thoughts and things swirling around my squishy organic brain, and I put it into an external resource every single day. To learn more about my process for creating and maintaining a second brain, check out the video I linked in the description called "This Productivity System Changed My Life." Now, hyperfocus commandment number 5, you gotta set clear priorities. As Peter Drucker said, there is no greater waste than to do with excellence that which shouldn't be done at all. And this might be one of my all-time favorite quotes given just how often I reference it. But the reason I reference it so damn much is because in my experience, most people are failing to achieve their goals because they simply waste time doing things that do not matter. As a good rule for life, don't waste time doing stupid shit. Okay, so it's one thing to say that, but obviously nobody wakes up in the morning thinking they should twiddle it away on silly things that don't matter. But life just kind of happens, and sometimes you get sucked into the weeds. Listen, I get it. I lived in the weeds for the better part of 2 decades. The way I got out was by creating a priority management system. Now, one of the simplest but most effective systems that I personally use is called the Eisenhower Matrix. Okay, so the way this works is we're gonna graph out tasks based on urgency, which is our x-axis, and importance, which is our y-axis. If a task is both urgent and important, then it goes in the top right quadrant, which I call my MIGs, or my most important goals. These are things that because they're urgent and important, you should always do first. Now, the next group of tasks are things that are important, but not necessarily urgent. And we put these in the top left quadrant. These are WIGs, or wildly important goals. But the problem with them is that because they aren't urgent, we have a tendency to keep procrastinating or delaying them. So to avoid this, we've got to make sure that we actually schedule time to tackle our WIGs and then, actually follow through. The next layer of tasks are things that are urgent but not important, which falls into quadrant 3 below our MIGs. Things like checking emails is a classic quadrant 3 task. Now, these are things that often do have to get done, but you should only spend time on them after you've made meaningful progress on your MIGs and your WIGs. And our last group of tasks fall into quadrant 4, which is reserved for things that are neither urgent nor important. And these are tasks that are generally better just left undone. All right, before we move on, here's another way to think about how you should treat each of these quadrants. It's called the 4 Ds of execution, which stands for do, delay, delegate, and delete. Put another way, you do your MIGs, you delay your WIGs, you delegate your quadrant 3 tasks, and you delete everything else. All right. Now with that, you officially have a priority management system, which is good because commandment 6 says, never set a goal without a system. Scott Adams, the author of Dilbert, said something in his book, How to Fail at Practically Everything and Still Win Big. And it's gonna maybe ruffle some feathers, but here's the truth. He's absolutely right when he said that goals are for losers, winners use systems. Okay, maybe this isn't like that controversial, but it is worth unpacking because in my experience, people are far better goal setters than they are goal getters. And the reason is they suck at creating systems. Now, a number of psychology studies have shown that the most effective system for achieving goals is to create what's called an implementation intention. Simply put, you write down 2 things. What are you gonna do and when are you gonna do it? And I know this seems incredibly basic, perhaps even remedial, but remember, fundamentals executed at an exceptional level win championships. So whenever you set a goal for yourself, you must document exactly what you plan to do to achieve that goal, and then you gotta put it on the calendar. Because here's a truth that took me way too many years to figure out. Either you own your schedule, or your schedule owns you. There is no third option. All right, this brings us to hyperfocus commandment number 7, guard your intention. Here's the truth, your brain, it's a miracle, but it's also incredibly lazy. Its only job is to keep you alive while using as little energy as possible. If you left it to its own devices, your brain would just keep you zoned out, eating sweets and scrolling social media from the safety and comfort of your couch all day. Problem is, you are not your brain, and I'm guessing that your grand goal in life is not to simply survive. You want to thrive. So you can see how you and your brain are inherently at odds here, right? Whoever wins this battle on any given day determines whether you make progress towards your greatness or whether you fall into a 6-hour Netflix binge. There's no shame, we've all been there, but if you don't want to go back to that place, you need to create an intention maintenance system. So the one I use is very simple. I program an alarm into my phone to go off randomly a handful of times throughout the day. And when that alarm goes off, it's accompanied with the question, what's my outcome? It's a very simple question, but it's powerful because it gives me a moment to pause whatever I'm doing at that moment and reflect on what's the ultimate outcome I could expect if I keep doing the thing that I'm doing in that moment. And the reason this is so effective is because it's a pattern interrupt. So often in our lives, we just go mindlessly from one task to the next without any real intention. As a consequence, the quality of our results suffer. This question, what's my outcome? It gives me the opportunity to introduce a moment of intention into my life. And truly, something I've learned over the years is that it's very hard to fail at anything if you do it with enough intention. All right, hyperfocus commandment number 8, you have to lift mental weights daily. Listen, focus is a muscle, and like all your muscles, to strengthen it, you must stress it beyond its current capacity. This is why you need to develop a daily thinking time practice, which is just another way of saying make time each day to do some mental weightlifting. Not only will this increase the clarity of your thoughts, but it will improve the quality and intensity of your focus. A couple popular ways to get a mental workout include praying, journaling, meditating, going for long walks, or taking long showers and just thinking deeply. But the truth is, going to the gym is hard. And it never gets easier, you just get better. And I think the reason that most of us struggle with regular mental workouts is because it's really hard to see progress. You can't see your focus muscle getting bigger and more well-defined, and so we default to thinking, well, I must be wasting my time. I promise you, you're not. Keep with it. Remember, some of the most important things in life cannot be measured. This is one of them. So just keep showing up and moving the weights. It'll be worth it, I promise. All right, now it's time to get very tactical with the hyperfocus commandment number 9, optimize your environment. See, focus is the ability to resist distractions. Now, one way to develop laser-like focus is just through sheer force of will. You could do a lot of mental weightlifting and just increase your ability to resist distractions through sheer force of will. And we just discussed how to do that, but there's another way that can increase the quality of your focus. Instead of trying to resist distractions, just avoid them altogether. And we do this by designing our life, or more specifically, our work environment with intention. Truly, this is one of the most powerful tools you have at your disposal for getting into the zone. So it's worth spending some time on this. Now, we're all different, so there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Some people work best in a coffee shop, others do best in a closet. But with that said, there are some universal truths. In particular, there are 3 things that can positively or negatively impact our ability to focus. The first one is audio. Noises distract me like nothing else. If there's a creaking floorboard in the other room or one of my cats is meowing, I'm done. My mind is off, it's wandering, and I can't get back on task until I resolve whatever that sound is. The solution is noise canceling headphones and a white noise playlist. Personally, I use brain.fn, but you could also go and look at a playlist on YouTube. The second is visual distractions. See, windows are a real problem for me, though maybe not for you. My eye in particular is drawn to movement in pretty things. So when doing deep work, I tend to work with my back to a window. Now there's other visual elements of your workspace that are very important that we need to be mindful of. One of the biggest is clutter. As they say, a messy desk equals a messy mind. And you might be one of those people who swears by the fact that you do your best work in a chaotic environment, but the truth is, you're probably less effective than you think. Case in point, interesting studies have shown that people like me with ADHD tend to use an organizational system called piling. What this means is we pile things up and then we think that's our organizational system. For instance, we pile up our clothes on the floor rather than putting them into a hamper, or we pile up a bunch of papers on the desk because we know exactly where the one is that we need, right? Wrong. It's been consistently shown that people who rely on this form of organization are far less effective than they think they are. And this hit me really hard when I first learned about it, because this is exactly what I do whenever I'm left to my own devices, which is why I struggled so damn hard throughout my 20s. Things didn't really start improving in my life until I created structure and order out of the chaos. So I encourage you, clean up your desk, clean up your office. All right, and the third thing that we need to control for is the vibe. I do my best work when I feel inspired. Working in a closet doesn't really inspire me, but I've also got the mind of a squirrel, so there's certain types of work I can't do in a coffee shop. So the solution for me was to create my own fortress of focus. For me, that's my home office, which is crafted with care to inspire, but never distract me. Now this leads us to commandment number 10, which happens to be my secret weapon for getting into the flow state. And it's something I've been surprised to discover that most people just don't do, which is crazy because every single professional athlete or performer in the world does this before entering the arena. They engage in a warm-up routine. For me, before stepping onto the field of focus, I spend a couple minutes executing a focus ritual. This is a way for me to sync my mind with my body and to create an intentional space from which focus can blossom. So here's my ritual, and I strongly encourage you to steal whatever works for you from this. First, I clear my desk, which just has a nasty tendency of getting really cluttered throughout the day. I do this first because I found that getting into flow or hyperfocus can be a little uncomfortable. And if I have things on my desk that need to be cleaned up, my mind just keeps jumping to it, thinking, I should probably put those dishes away, or I should probably organize it, put these pens, or now would be a good time to dust, right? I never worry about dusting until it's time to do a task. So what I found is just spending a couple minutes to quickly tidy up my desk makes it so that my mind doesn't jump to trying to find a distraction in it later. Step 2 is I set a timer. And I'm a big fan of the Pomodoro method of working in 20-minute sprints with 5-minute breaks. For deep work sessions, I typically do this for around 90 minutes before taking a longer break. Step 3 is to light a candle. Listen, your sense of smell is one of the most powerful tools for something called state management. By setting the mood with a particular scent, you can quickly and easily send your brain the message that it's time to focus up. Personally, I've got a vanilla, sandalwood, and tobacco candle in my office that puts me right into the zone. Step 4, I put on my noise canceling headphones, I turn on some binaural beats. You can find some deep focus tracks for free on YouTube. I use a service called brain.fm, which is really awesome. Step 5, and this is a bit of a weird one. I stare at the point of a pen for 30 seconds. Seriously, I hold a pen at arm's length and I just stare at the very tip of it for 30 seconds. This is something used in meditation practices called tratak or gazing. Now, I haven't really been able to find any scientific research to support this practice, but from my own personal experience, it works really well to help me start zoning out the world. All right, so our 6th and final step in this focus ritual is to take a whiff of something called Boom Boom and then just get to work. Boom Boom is just a little tube filled with different smells that have been shown to elicit different states. Again, because scent is so intricately linked with our physiology, why wouldn't we leverage this tool to our advantage? So if you're too hyped up and your mind is racing all over the place, you could take a sniff of lavender, which has a calming effect and lowers the heart rate. On the other hand, if you're dragging ass and you need a boost of energy, peppermint's gonna get you up and moving. Now, all told, my focus ritual probably takes less than 5 minutes, but it's vital to priming my subconscious, my physical state, and my environment so that I'm in a place conducive to deep focus. And when you stack this ritual on top of the other 9 commandments of hyperfocus, you start to unlock this superhuman ability to cut through distractions, overcome procrastination, and just get shit done, which is truthfully one of the best feelings in the world. So I hope you enjoy.